Please pray with me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. More of you, O Christ, less of me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts draw us closer to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. I love preaching from the Psalms, even though the Psalms are really not meant to be preached. They're meant to be prayed. They're meant to be sung. They're meant to be marinated in. And so to preach from the Psalms is a little cheeky, but I do it anyway. As most of you know, praying the Psalms is one of my primary spiritual practices. It's part of my Benedictine spirituality that's part of the monastery at Christ in the Desert. And so I love to pray the Psalms. I have to admit, lately I haven't been doing it as much as I should. But the reason that I love the Psalms and love praying the Psalms is because they are always a paradox. Every single psalm, and especially in English, it's really hard for us to wrap our heads around it. It's a little more obvious in Hebrew if you speak Hebrew, which I don't. I can read it sort of, but it's everything all at once. Because in Hebrew, they do not have a word for but. I mean, they have a word for but they don't have a word for but. They don't do like in Greek, not this, but that, if, when. Instead, the primary conjunction in Hebrew is and. So when you read a psalm and it says, oh God, the works of your hands and the beauty and the majesty and the magic and everything else, and then the next thing says, and smite my enemies and break the teeth in their mouths, this would seem to be a paradox, but in the Psalms it is not. Because these ancient prayers know that we can have joy and grief at once, right, Terry? We know that actually we can be full of praise and moved by beauty and absolutely furious simultaneously. And this particular psalm, even though, they numbered them, at some point, linear thinking caused people to number things. This particular psalm is thought to be one of the very oldest scraps of the entire Bible. It may be as much as 7,000 years old. It may be that old. Many of the other psalms attributed to David are not nearly as old. So this is some ancient wisdom we're dealing with here in Psalm 8. And rightly, it starts with, how majestic. Our friends at the Order of St. Helen, the Episcopal nunnery on the East Coast, they're using God our Governor. Now, many people will translate that different ways. It is in Hebrew YWYH. And some of you know that you're not supposed to pronounce that in Hebrew. In a Jewish synagogue, when they get to the name of God, they just stop. And then they go on because you don't say the name. Now, ironically, paradoxically, the next line is, how majestic is your name in all the earth. But it's the name we cannot speak. Other names for God in the Hebrew Bible, such as Elohim, is the God of our dreams, that comes to us in dreams. But this is YWYH, which I like to translate as I am who I am becoming. It's the I am God. I could have said I am. But also, in our current political situation, I think I'm all about the governor. So I'm okay with governor today. And that's what the Order of St. Helen wanted to call this name. I considered just putting a blank and asking you all to just stop. Oh God, our... So the other paradoxes that are in this psalm, which are so interesting to me, is the idea that we are both a little lower than the angels and yet nothing. And we all know that that's very much true. You know, if you look at the new mural that went up down on Appian Road of it's sort of a mystical painting of our watershed. And you have this tiny little dot that says, "You are here." And yet we can perceive the whole watershed and we are part of it. As Bayard Rustin says, we are a part of all that is. And if we don't learn it like the good way, we'll learn it the hard way. So what does that mean? That we are part of everything that is, that we are both a speck and the apple of the divine eye. What does that mean? Well, it means that we shouldn't think too much of ourselves. That's for sure. That we are no less, no more than the coyotes who were howling last night in the wind, or Chris and Janie who are sitting there with Lila, or your puppy who's with us, whose name, of course, I'm blanking. Liza. I should always, Liza with a Z. I will remember that now. We're no more or less than any other being. But we are not less either. We are not helpless. We are not puppets in the hands of an angry God trying to make us do this or do that for whatever reasons. That's not how the creation works. Instead, we are beloved by a creator who finds all of creation beloved. In the same way, I often think of, I could have said, instead of God our governor, I could have said God our artist, God the artist. You love the piece that you have made. You love it. You might also be willing to let it go. You also let it be how it is in the world. You no longer try to control it once you've created it. This is sort of what happens for composers, right, Alex? When you write a piece and somebody else plays it, they're not going to play it the way you play it. You hope that they will play it well, but there's no guarantee, right?
Yeah, I know coach them, and sometimes it happens where I like their interpretation more than what I hear in my head, so I just don't go with it.
There you go. Exactly. And this is how it is. You worked hard to create it. You loved it while you were creating it. You, I assume, still love it playing it. Maybe you do, you don't. But you put it out into the world, and sometimes they'll play it better. Sometimes they'll play it worse. Sometimes, and the more you get known, you might not always be able to coach everyone who plays your music. And we hope that for you. We want to have random people all over the world playing your music, Alex. So what do we take away from this as a principle? First of all, paradox is inherent in everything. Second, of course, what we call in theology non-dualism. Two things that would seem to be opposites can be true simultaneously. In fact, they're nearly always true. There is no right or wrong, as Rumi once wrote. There is a field. I will meet you there in the place beyond right and wrong. And that's tricky because I don't know about you, but I like to say, that's bad, this is good. I like flowers. I don't like sound equipment that's not working. I don't like people who are mean. I really don't. In fact, sometimes I get a little hateful. But people are people. And the psalm has included them too. And Bayard Rustin, you don't think an openly gay man who was African American in 1963 had a few enemies? And a lot of them were his friends. He knew that hating them was not going to do him any good in the end. Because what goes around comes around. What we put out comes back to us. So the principle is, love it all. Even the things that are not very lovable. Love it all. Endeavor to love it all. Endeavor to be fully who you have been created to be. A little less than the angels. A little less than the angels. And I think the psalm is saying that we're a little less than the angels because angels are eternal and we do die. We are mortal. And may you experience your connection to the holy, whatever you call it, whether it's YWYH or Elohim or the continuum or the universe, whatever names work. Language is a complete failure for talking about that which is, as Leonard Bernstein wrote, what's behind the sky. What's behind the sky. Whatever that is, give it whatever name you want. But know that it is a source of love for you and, paradoxically, the rest of creation too. May we all seek to live justly within the paradoxes, justly within the absurdities, in that field beyond right and wrong. May it be so. Amen.